The Sermon on the Mount is about the narrow path that leads to the blessed life. But at the end of the sermon, Jesus switches metaphors. He says that hearing and doing His words are like the firm foundation upon which the blessed life is built. In other words, the blessing is in the doing. So take a moment to reflect back on the Sermon on the Mount and ask these three questions. Number one, what is one lesson I feel inspired by, challenged in, or convicted about? Maybe your idea of righteousness has been like the Pharisees. You focused more on external things than internal transformation. Maybe you've never murdered someone, but right now you feel resentful toward your neighbor. Maybe you've never committed adultery, but you fantasize about how much better your life could be if you had married someone else. Maybe you're not a liar, but you're full of empty promises and half-hearted commitments that damage people's trust. Maybe you're a pretty good person, but you're motivated by what everyone else thinks of you. And maybe you're not greedy, but you know more about the stock market than investing in projects that help the poor and needy. And maybe you say God is in control, but you're anxious and worried about all the same things as your neighbors. Or maybe you have strong moral convictions, but you are judgmental, condescending, and annoying to everyone that you're trying so hard to change. These are a few ways that the Sermon on the Mount might challenge us. But that leads to the second question. What is one small step I could take and know I would take along this narrow path? In children, the first step is always the hardest and ironically the smallest. But eventually those small, awkward, and strenuous steps become the natural, graceful, and almost effortless activities of walking, running, or riding a bike. And in the same way, the smallest steps that we take in walking this narrow path right now will become an ever more beautiful and increasingly effortless way of life. So ask yourself and your family and friends, and most of all, ask God, what's the one small step? And it leads to the last question, that is, how has Jesus already paved the narrow path to walk this road with me? If we're honest, walking the narrow path may not always seem very easy. At times, it may not feel worth it. But when we fix our eyes on Jesus, we see the pioneer and perfecter of our faith who, for the joy set before Him, endured the cross, despised the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. In other words, we know the narrow path leads to the blessed life because Jesus has already paved the way through death itself and walked out the other side. And the more that I can picture Jesus taking the exact step that I need to take, then the more Spirit-filled motivation I have to actually follow through, trusting that the blessing is in the doing as I walk that narrow path with Him.